Every family has a story that seems like a legend. One of those stories passed down from grandmother to grandchild, always told with the same gleam in the eyes, the same whisper of mystery. This is one of them. They say it's the cornbread enchantment, and perhaps it really is a spell. Not the kind of spell cast by witches, but a simpler one. The spell that memory casts on the heart. Long ago, in the kitchens of the southern United States, cornbread was never just food. It was an offering. It was a prayer. It was love. Flour, water, butter, and salt, mixed by hands that knew how to wait for the right moment. The moment when the aroma rising from the bowl already whispered miracles. They say grandmothers could transform anything into food. While mixing the dough, they spoke softly to God. They asked for strength, health, and peace. Some whispered a secret wish, that the cornbread would heal the heart of whoever ate it. It was their way of caring without needing to say a word. The kitchen was their temple. No gold, no altar, only fire, flour, and faith. The children watched in wonder, trying to unravel the mystery behind Grandma's cornbread. Was it the way she stirred the dough? The time in the oven? Was the secret in the salt, or in the love? The truth is that the charm was in the gesture. In each patient movement, repeated with care, there was a silent prayer. When the cornbread was ready, its aroma filled the house. The neighbors noticed. The family smiled. It was an invitation to the table, a call to share. And in that moment, it didn't matter if life was hard, if money was scarce, or if times were uncertain. For a few minutes, there was abundance. The bread was small, but the love was immense. They say that once, a woman lost everything: her husband, her house, and her hope. All she had left was a handful of cornmeal and a little butter. Even so, she lit the fire. She made the bread, and when it came out of the oven, she gave half to her neighbor. The next day, someone knocked on her door with a basket full of food. The woman smiled and said, "I knew it." The spell worked, because the magic of cornbread isn't in the recipe, it's in the generosity. It's in the faith of those who believe that sharing multiplies. Even the smallest gift can become a miracle. When given with an open heart, grandmothers called that a blessing. Her children called it luck. But, deep down, it was love transformed into ritual. And every time someone makes that recipe again, a memory awakens. The smell, the warmth, the sound of the oven, everything returns, as if time had never passed. Today, perhaps we no longer have wood-burning stoves or the silence of old kitchens, but the enchantment is still here, in every meal made with care, at every table where someone gives thanks before eating. Grandma's cornbread lives on in those who learned that cooking is a way of loving. They say the kitchen was where the real stories lived, not in books, not in letters, but in the rhythm of stirring, the hush of waiting, and the warmth that rose from the oven like a promise. It was there, in the quiet corners of old southern homes, that generations of women passed down more than recipes. They passed down resilience. They passed down grace. They passed down the kind of wisdom that doesn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. The cornbread was never just about hunger. It was about healing, about gathering, about remembering who you were, even when the world outside forgot. There was a kind of magic in the way grandmothers moved. Not hurried, not distracted, just present. Fully there, in the moment, as if the act of cooking was a kind of prayer in motion. And maybe it was. They didn't need cookbooks. They didn't measure with spoons. They measured with memory, with instinct, with the feel of the dough between their fingers. And somehow, it always turned out right. Children would sit on the floor, legs crossed, eyes wide, watching every move like it was a sacred ritual. And in a way, it was. Because what they were witnessing wasn't just cooking, it was the preservation of something ancient, something tender, something holy. The stories told in those kitchens weren't always spoken. Sometimes they were baked. Sometimes they were folded into dough. Sometimes they were carried in the scent that drifted down the hallway and wrapped itself around your heart before you even took a bite. There's a tale that's been told in more than one family about a grandmother who made cornbread every Sunday, no matter what. Even when the crops failed, even when the money ran out, even when grief sat heavy in the room like smoke, she would rise before the sun, light the fire, and begin the ritual, mixing, humming, praying. And when the bread was done, she'd place it on the table, cut it into thick, warm slices, and serve it with a smile that said, "We're still here. We still have this." That bread became more than food. It became a symbol, a sign that life would go on, that love could still be shared, that even in the hardest times, there was something to hold on to. And the children who grew up eating that bread, they carried the memory with them, into cities, into wars, into marriages and heartbreaks and new beginnings. And when they missed home, they didn't just miss the place, they missed the smell, the warmth, the feeling of being wrapped in something safe and familiar. Years later, some of them tried to recreate it. They searched for the exact ingredients, they followed every step, but something was always missing, because the spell wasn't in the cornmeal, it wasn't in the butter, it was in the hands that made it, in the heart that gave it, in the silence that surrounded it. And yet, even if the taste wasn't quite the same, the act of making it brought something back, a memory, a voice, a moment, and that was enough. Because the spell of the cornbread isn't about perfection, it's about presence, it's about intention, it's about the quiet kind of love that doesn't need to be explained. In some families, the tradition continues. A granddaughter learns the recipe, a grandson watches the way the batter folds, and though the world outside has changed, though the kitchens are filled with stainless steel and electric timers, the spirit remains. Because when you make something with love, you're not just feeding a body, you're feeding a soul, you're telling a story, you're keeping someone alive. And maybe that's the real spell, not the ingredients, not the oven, but the way something so simple can carry so much meaning, can hold so much memory, can remind us of who we are and who we come from. They say that when a grandmother made cornbread, she wasn't just feeding her family, she was anchoring them to something older, something deeper, something that couldn't be shaken by storms or sorrow. In those kitchens, the world slowed down. Time didn't tick, it simmered. And while the batter rested, so did the worries of the day. There was a kind of hush that settled over the room, as if even the walls were listening. The fire crackled, the scent of cornmeal and butter filled the air. And in that moment, everything felt possible again. Some say the spell worked best on rainy days. When the sky was grey and the heart was heavy, that's when the cornbread had the most power. To comfort, to warm, to remind you that even the coldest days could end with something golden. There's a story passed down in whispers about a boy who wouldn't speak, not after his father left, not after the silence settled in his chest like a stone. His grandmother didn't ask questions, she just baked. Every day, she made cornbread. She'd place a slice on his plate, kiss the top of his head, and say, "This is for your voice, baby, it's waiting for you." Weeks passed, then months, and one morning, as the butter melted into the warm bread, the boy looked up and said, "Thank you." Just that. 2 words, but they broke the spell of silence, and the grandmother smiled, because she knew the other spell had worked. Cornbread wasn't just food, it was medicine, it was memory, it was a way to say what couldn't be said. And the women who made it, they were more than cooks. They were keepers of something sacred. They knew that healing didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it came in crumbs, in crusts, in the quiet act of feeding someone who didn't know they were hungry. In every slice, there was a story, a lesson, a lullaby, and those who ate it, they carried that story with them. Even if they didn't realize it, years later, they'd find themselves in a strange kitchen, far from home, and suddenly crave cornbread, not for the taste, but for the feeling, the memory, the spell. One woman, now grown, told of how she made cornbread for her own children every time they were sick, not because it cured the fever, but because it reminded them they were safe, that someone was watching, that someone believed they'd get better. She didn't use her grandmother's exact recipe. She added her own twist, a bit of honey, a pinch of cinnamon, but the heart of it was the same, the intention, the love, the quiet hope folded into every bite. And that's the thing about spells. They change shape, they travel, they adapt to new hands, new kitchens, new lives, but their essence remains. The spell of the cornbread isn't locked in the past. It lives in every act of care, every meal made with love, every moment when someone chooses to give, even when they have little. So when you make cornbread, or soup, or stew, or tea, know that you're doing more than cooking. You're remembering, you're honoring, you're casting a spell of your own. And maybe, just maybe, someone will taste it and feel something shift, something soften, something open. And they won't know why, but they'll feel it, and they'll carry it with them, like a story, like a song, like a blessing. There's something sacred about the way a memory returns through food. It doesn't knock, it doesn't ask permission, It simply arrives with the scent of butter melting on a hot crust, with the sound of a knife slicing through golden edges, with the warmth that rises from a plate and wraps itself around your chest like a hug you didn't know you needed. Cornbread, in its simplicity, holds more than flavor. It holds time, it holds people, it holds the quiet strength of those who came before us, those who didn't have much but gave everything. In some homes, the recipe was never written down. It lived in the hands, in the way the bowl was held, in the rhythm of stirring, in the pause before pouring the batter into the pan. That sacred second where the cook closed her eyes and whispered something only she and the bread would ever know. They say that's when the spell was cast, not with words, not with magic wands, but with presence, with intention, with love so quiet it didn't need to be named. And when the bread came out of the oven, it wasn't just food, it was a message, a reminder, a promise that even in the hardest times, there was still something warm to hold on to. There's a story told in a small town about a woman who baked cornbread every Saturday and left it on the porch for anyone who needed it. She never asked who took it. She never waited for thanks. She just believed that if someone was hungry, they deserved to be fed. Some said she was strange. Others said she was a saint. But the children in the neighborhood, they called her Grandma Bread. And every time they passed her house, they slowed down, hoping to catch the smell of something baking. One winter, when the town was hit by a storm and the power went out for days, it was Grandma Bread who lit her old wood stove and made enough cornbread to feed half the block. People came with empty hands and left with full hearts. And when someone asked her why she did it, she simply said, "Because someone once did it for me." That's the thing about the spell. It doesn't end with one person. It moves, it grows, it passes from hand to hand, from oven to oven, from heart to heart. And even if the recipe changes, even if the ingredients shift with time, the essence remains. Because the spell isn't about the bread, it's about the giving, the remembering, the choosing, again and again, to turn what little you have into something that can nourish someone else. In today's world, we often rush through meals. We eat standing up. We scroll while we chew. We forget to taste. We forget to pause. We forget that food is more than fuel, it's connection. But in those old kitchens, every meal was a moment, a chance to gather, to listen, to laugh, to cry, to be human, together. And the cornbread, it was always at the center. Not because it was fancy, not because it was rare, but because it was made with care, with hands that had seen sorrow and still chose to serve, with hearts that had been broken and still chose to love. So when we talk about the spell of the cornbread, we're not talking about superstition. We're talking about memory, about ritual, about the invisible threads that tie us to those who came before. We're talking about the way a grandmother's hands can teach more than any book, the way a simple act like baking bread can become a legacy. And maybe that's what we need to remember, that the most powerful spells are the ones we cast without even knowing. When we choose kindness, when we choose generosity, when we choose to feed someone, not just with food, but with presence, with patience, with love. They say that when a grandmother baked cornbread, she wasn't just feeding her family, she was feeding memory, she was feeding hope, she was feeding the invisible thread that ties generations together. In those kitchens, time didn't rush, it lingered, it listened, it allowed space for stories to unfold between the cracks of the floorboards and the steam rising from the oven. The cornbread was never just about taste, it was about presence, about being there fully, about showing up with open hands and a heart willing to give. There's a story told in a quiet town about a girl who lost her mother young. She moved in with her grandmother, who didn't speak much, but baked every morning. The girl didn't understand why the bread mattered. She missed hugs, she missed lullabies, she missed the sound of her mother's voice. But every morning there was cornbread, warm, golden, waiting. And slowly, the girl began to feel something shift. Not in words, not in explanations, but in the way the bread made her feel safe, held, seen. One day, she asked, "Why do you make this every morning?" Her grandmother looked at her, smiled softly, and said, "Because it's how I say I love you." That girl grew up. She became a teacher. She had children of her own. And every time one of them felt lost, she made cornbread. Not because it solved everything, but because it reminded them that love doesn't always need words. And that's the legacy, not the recipe, not the ingredients, but the intention, the quiet decision to care, even when the world feels too loud to hear it. In today's world, We often forget the power of small things. We chase big moments, big gestures, big answers. But the grandmothers knew better. They knew that healing lives in the ordinary, in the stirring, in the waiting, in the offering of something warm to someone who didn't ask for it, but needed it. Cornbread was never meant to impress. It was meant to comfort, to gather, to remind us that we belong. And maybe that's what we need now. Not more noise, not more speed, but more moments like those. Moments where we pause, where we listen, where we make something with our hands and give it without expecting anything in return. Because that's the spell, that's the magic, that's the memory. So if you've ever tasted cornbread and felt something stir inside you, a memory, a longing, a warmth, know that you've been touched by the spell. And if you've ever made it for someone else, you've passed it on. You've become part of the story, part of the legacy, part of the quiet revolution that grandmothers began with flour, fire, and faith. Maybe the real magic isn't in the bread at all. Maybe it's in the way we remember, in the way we carry forward the quiet rituals that once held our families together. Maybe the spell of the cornbread isn't about what's baked, but about what's kept alive. Because when we remember, we honor. We honor the hands that stirred before ours, the voices that hummed while the dough rose, the hearts that gave without asking for anything in return. And when we pass it on, when we teach a child to stir, when we light the oven with intention, when we serve something warm to someone who needs it, we become part of the story. We become the next verse in a song that's been sung for generations. There's a woman who still makes cornbread every Sunday. She doesn't need to. She could buy it from the store. She could microwave something faster, but she doesn't. She wakes up early. She ties her apron. She opens the window to let in the morning light. And she begins not because she has to, but because she wants to remember. Because she wants her grandchildren to know that love can be folded into batter, that care can be baked into crust, that history can rise in the oven, golden and warm. And when they sit at the table, when they take that first bite, they don't just taste corn and butter. They taste belonging. They taste memory. They taste the spell. And maybe one day, when they're older, when the world feels too fast, too loud, too much, they'll remember that taste, and they'll slow down, and they'll bake, and they'll pass it on, because that's how the spell survives. Not in books, not in museums, but in kitchens, in hands, in hearts. So if you've ever felt the comfort of a meal made with love, if you've ever been fed by someone who didn't say much but gave you everything in a plate, you've known the spell. And if you've ever made something for someone else, not because you had to, but because you wanted to, you've cast it. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't take magic words. It doesn't take special tools. It just takes presence and love and the willingness to give. So tonight, or tomorrow, or someday soon, when you find yourself in the kitchen with a bowl in your hands and a memory in your chest, make the cornbread, even if it's not perfect, even if it's just for you. Because every time we remember, we keep something alive. And every time we share, we plant a seed. And who knows, maybe someone, years from now, will tell a story about you, about the way your bread made them feel safe, about the way your kitchen smelled like home, about the way your love tasted like something golden. If this story reminded you of someone you love, share this video with them. Let them know they're part of your story. And leave a comment below. What family recipe holds a little magic for you? Who taught you how to cook with love? Because every story shared is a seed planted, and that's how we keep the wisdom of our grandmothers alive. And this was another episode of Stories My Grandma Told, part of the America We Remember, keeping history alive. Another production of the channel Memories of Ancient America, where every flavor is a memory, and every memory a lesson in love. Until the next episode, we'll meet you there.